Hey YouTube, Bob here. Welcome to World of Nintendo. I've got a lot more content like this on the way, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment to let me know what you think. Here we go. In this edition of Nintendo Unboxed, we're going to do a little bit of a follow-up to the previous video on the 1987 cartridge release of Kid Icarus for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Here we have the Japanese disk system version of that same game, but released for said system in 1986. And of course, the main difference between this format and the cartridge is the ability to save without the need of a password here. So here we've got the game in its outer plastic case, kind of a soft plastic case, sealed by the Diskun card sticker here. And then when you break that seal, it says void. Interesting that it says that in English and not in Japanese. Then you pull this out of the outer case. We've got a harder plastic case, kind of like an audio cassette. A little bit of a warning here in Japanese, and then the instruction manual for a game that we'll take a look at. First, let's open up the card, or the disc rather. And just like all the other ones we've taken a look at, you can see that it's keyed. That first I and the third N, they're a little bit deeper, so counterfeit disc manufacturers would have to go to that extra step here and make sure that they mimicked this keying system. Certainly doable, but just one more deterrent that Nintendo tried to incorporate into the Famicom disk system design, because that was the biggest downfall of this format, was the rampant piracy. But here you can see we've got a dual-sided disc because it saves information. So you usually have to put this in with side A up. Then when you start your game, you have to turn it around, flip it over, and then insert it into side B. And you might even have to put it right back into side A again. And depending on the size of the game, you may have to flip it over again in the middle of gameplay, just like with The Legend of Zelda. But in here we've got more of a kind of paper sleeve, very reminiscent of the 5 1/4 floppy disks. They would be in these types of fibrous paper sleeves as well. So that's what we have here, with a little bit of a warning printed on it about not touching the film media. And then here, a little bit more of a card. We've got some art on it. Art for the game, which is an illustration, unlike the pixel art that was featured on the NES version of the game. And I did mention that this was called Parutenna no Kagami, Palutena's Mirror. That's what this was called in Japan instead of Kid Icarus. But then we've got a little notation here that it's a dual-sided disc, A and B for the read and write. Alright, let's take a look at the instruction manual. Quite a thick one here, a lot thicker than the one that we took a look at for the US cartridge version, but of course they're trying to include all of that content in a much smaller area, so of course we're going to get more pages. Got those warnings, just like we've seen before in Legend of Zelda and Metroid, about how to handle the disc, what to do, what not to do. And again, we've got the extra stickers here. And somebody brought it to my attention that the purpose of these stickers may be for, you could buy blank discs and have the game written to them at a kiosk in a store. You would pay for them, obviously. It was a legal, licensed by Nintendo way of doing that. But what I don't understand still about this possibility is, would the stores have these manuals on hand and be able to give them to you as you wrote the games to your blank disc? That I don't know. That would be interesting to know. So if you do, please let me know in the comments. So we've got our table of contents here. Got the same illustrations that we saw in the US version of the game, but printed on more of a matte type of paper here. Of course, all with Japanese text. And with the kanji that they're using here, they usually kind of spell that out for kids in hiragana or katakana, as kids were still learning kanji and may not know all of the characters yet. So if they didn't know the kanji, they could sound it out, so to speak, with hiragana or katakana. So some general disk system use here, loading the game. And then here we've got the save screen that we didn't get to see in the US version because it was password based. Interesting to see that there. Lots of information here about starting and retrying your game and saving. How the commands were mapped to each button. And it looks like they are following in the suit of having Pitt say some things to the kids who are reading the manual, which was kind of a nice touch there, as was this little illustration of Pitt with the controller in his hand. And they changed the color scheme and made it look more like the Famicom controller, which is great. So going through the status screen again. There's Pitt with his little tips, his wisdom there for the kids who are reading. Got the very, very basic map and flow of gameplay. Descriptions of each of the worlds. Overworld, Underworld, Sky World. We'll go into all the different weapons and items. Here we're getting illustrations and the pixel art as rendered in the game. In the US version, when we got to the bestiary, or the inhabitants of this game, we were only shown illustrations. We didn't get to see any of the pixel art, so it'll be interesting to see if the Japanese version follows that. Really like these little design cues here. That's very Famicom-like with the pulse. A lot of the early games didn't really have box art, they just had a pulse design. So yeah, again, it looks like here we are into the inhabitants of Angel Land here, and I'm seeing only illustrations, not seeing any pixel art. So not sure why they kind of broke with their tradition that we had seen with Legend of Zelda and Metroid, but that's what we got here. Some really cool illustrations. Neat to see how they were localized. It's all the same information, but just presented in a different format and kind of with a different aesthetic for a different culture here. This is all very manga-like. And of course, manga was really not a thing over here in the United States back in the mid or late 80s. So they put in a little bit more of a format that United States children or North American children would be familiar with. So again, some warnings about how to handle your disks, and then the error codes that you might be presented with if there was a problem reading or writing your data for your game. And then there's Pitsu saying goodbye. So that is the Famicom Disk System version of Kid Icarus, or Palutena no Kagami, Palutena's Mirror. Hope you enjoyed the video and that you'll stay tuned for more Nintendo Unboxed videos. I got a lot of those on the way, as well as some other content. So thanks for being here today. Take care.